previously on A Love That Lingered. Grace and Arthur's bond deepened as they stole away from the world, discovering joy and freedom at the waterfall, where laughter and love overpowered duty for a fleeting afternoon. But reality never lingers far. Plans for their wedding press forward, even as whispers of war grow louder, threatening the fragile peace they've carved out together. This is episode 19, Shadows on the Horizon. The late spring air carried with it a sense of liveliness, a reminder that time was moving forward whether one was ready for it or not. The Caldwell Manor, usually steeped in a sense of timeless grandeur, felt busier now than ever before. Servants scurried from room to room with fabric swatches, guest lists, and floral arrangements, while Grace's mother, Lillian Everly, arrived nearly every other day with suggestions that bordered on demands. At first, Grace had delighted in the planning, choosing lace, writing invitations, imagining the moment she would walk down the aisle toward Arthur, her heart brimming with certainty. But lately, there was a different air lingering in the corridors, one not born of excitement, but of unease. Letters had begun arriving with increasing frequency. Some carried news of small skirmishes, others of neighboring lords being called to aid in defense of the crown. At breakfast one morning, Arthur had read one such letter, his jaw tightening, the paper trembling just slightly in his hand before he folded it neatly and set it aside, as though it contained nothing of consequence. Grace had not pressed him then, but she had felt the weight of his silence. Now, in the drawing room, with the windows flung open to let in the smell of fresh flowers, Grace busied herself with a swath of silk while Arthur sat across from her, his spectacles low on his nose, as he reviewed yet another stack of correspondence. His eyes flicked up to her occasionally, softening whenever they landed on her face. But there was a distance there too, as if part of him already stood elsewhere, somewhere beyond the walls of the manor. She folded the silk in her lap and broke the quiet. "You've been somewhere else all morning." Arthur blinked, startled from his thoughts. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Forgive me. My mind seems intent on wandering." "Wandering where?" She pressed gently, though she already feared the answer. His hesitation told her everything. Though he smiled and changed the subject, Grace saw through him. The shadow of the war had already reached them, not yet in battles fought or fires burned, but in the heaviness that weighed on Arthur's every gesture. And though he said nothing, Grace knew, if the fighting crept closer, he would be called upon. The calm of their days was not everlasting. 2 days later, another letter arrived. Arthur did not read this one at breakfast, nor at supper, but took it directly to his study. Grace, however, was not so easily deceived. She found him there in the fading afternoon light, the paper spread out before him, his hand braced against his forehead. "Arthur," she said quietly, stepping inside. He looked up sharply, then softened at the sight of her. "Grace, you shouldn't trouble yourself." "I should trouble myself when you are troubled," she interrupted, moving closer. "What does it say?" For a long moment he said nothing, then finally exhaled and pushed the letter toward her. The script was precise and cold, detailing the spread of conflict along the coast, the mobilization of certain noble households, the need for readiness should the crown call for further aid. Grace read each word carefully, her fingers curling against the edge of the desk. So it has begun. Arthur stood pacing the length of the study. His movements were restless, his usual poise fractured by tension. Yes, but for now I am not summoned. Not yet. Not yet, she echoed, her voice quiet. But you believe you will be? He stopped, turning to her, his eyes shadowed. It is likely. My family's name. My lands. I would be expected to stand for them, should the need arise. The words settled between them like stones. Grace swallowed, fighting the knot in her throat. And our wedding? Arthur's features softened instantly, his stride slowing. He crossed to her, taking her hands into his. I will not let it be delayed. Not if I have any power to prevent it. You are the only certainty in all of this, the only thing I want. Her heart ached with both love and dread. Then promise me we will not let the world steal this from us. Not the war, not duty, not anything. I promise, he said firmly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. But even as he said it, Grace felt the quiet tremor beneath his words. A promise made in earnest, but shadowed by the cruel uncertainty of what might come. In the days that followed, Arthur made a concerted effort to stay close. He joined her in the gardens, accompanied her on morning walks, and spent evenings in the parlor as she practiced embroidery or played the pianoforte. He even laughed, truly laughed, when she teased him for misbuttoning his waistcoat in his haste. Yet Grace could see that every moment he gave her was born of urgency, as though he knew their time might soon be interrupted. And while the wedding plans moved forward, flowers chosen, vows considered, there lingered the knowledge that war loomed just beyond the horizon. One evening, after a long day of preparations, Arthur drew Grace into the music room. The fire burned low, casting golden light across the polished piano. Play something, she urged, settling onto the bench beside him. Instead, Arthur placed his hands over hers. No, tonight I want to listen to you. She laughed softly, uncertain. You always say you prefer my singing. And I do. But tonight I want to hear your heart in the music. So she played, hesitant at first, then freer, the notes filling the room with something unspoken. Arthur watched her, not the keys, his gaze drinking in every movement as though to memorize her. When the song ended, she turned, cheeks flushed. You're staring. Because I am trying to keep this moment, he said simply. His hand reached up, cupping her cheek. So that, should the world call me away, I will carry it with me. Her throat tightened. She leaned into his touch, whispering, Then let me give you so many moments that you could never count them all. And there, in the flickering firelight, they kissed, deep and lingering, as though to defy the uncertainty waiting just beyond their doors. The days carried forward, each one drawing them closer to their wedding. Invitations were sealed, gowns fitted, flowers ordered. Outwardly, everything was as it should be. But in the quiet corners, shadows lingered. Each letter that arrived bore heavier news. Each silence between Arthur and Grace was weighted with the knowledge that their world could change at any moment. Late one night, Grace woke to find Arthur not in their sitting room, but in his study again, candlelight flickering over his face. He was bent over his desk, quill in hand, writing something she could not see. She lingered at the doorway, watching him, unease curling in her chest. He did not notice her, too lost in his work. For the first time, she wondered not what he was writing, but for whom. And though she did not yet know it, this question would linger long after the ink dried.